Well, welcome to video blog number 4 or 5, depending on how you count, if you count the special guest as one. We're sitting in the sanctuary here at Lynn Haven Methodist Church by the set for the new series, Cries of the Heart. And we wanted to say a little bit about the set, why we do this stuff, how series come about here at Lynn Haven Methodist Church. You probably need to know that our production manager that we hired in the latter part of last year is a guy named Mike Littleton. Do you want to say anything about Mike Littleton?
Well, this is his handiwork you see behind us here, and more than that, he's in a lot of the planning and the logistics of getting the sound and the lighting and the musicians and everything happening together on Sunday morning. So it's as production manager, he's got a lot on his plate, but he's not up front. So we wanted you to get to know him a little bit through this discussion.
Yeah, and it's a whole nother level of people to blame before it actually gets
That's
to
right.
us, which is awesome. Also, the set here, of course, was worked on by Thomas, who's our technical director, and so having Mike Littleton do some of the production communication stuff, it allows our technical director to technically direct instead of do everybody else's job too. So having Mike in place has been great, not just because he does his job, but because he allows a bunch of other people to do their jobs, which is great. So, and then this is kind of extra credit too. I mean, we didn't pay him to do this.
No, that's right. I mean, we have him part-time, but Mike puts in a lot of extra time that he doesn't need to, but he just does it for the Lord because he loves doing this, and we're just really grateful.
Yeah. We wanted to say a little bit, since we're starting this series, this is one of our Seeker series, to say, some people ask from time to time, where do these series come from? I mean, do we just dream them up? Do we just steal them all from other churches? How does a series like this come about so that people can know?
Well, you need to know this. We try to do what we call a Seeker series about 3 times a year. And this is a series of messages that we really try to engage people at where their needs are that are not Christians. And we typically try to do this right after the first of the year, right after Christmas, and then right after Easter, and then right after school starts. So those are the 3 times that you can expect to see this happen every year, where it should have value for everyone who's here. These messages should, but we try to present them in a kind of way that really relates to unchurched people and tries to meet a felt need that they have.
Yeah, one of the things about a Seeker series too is that people in churches over time seem to engage with non-Christians in the same speaking manner that they see their pastor preach at. So if they go to a church where the pastor's just really antagonistic of non-believers, and then people in church end up oftentimes talking like that to people who don't believe in their life. So part of the Seeker Series deal too is to try to model what it would look like to speak on a subject that a non-Christian would feel strongly about in a way that's winsome yet biblical, yet culturally sensitive and all that kind of thing.
Sure, and we try to avoid using theological language and even Christianese language that Christians are very familiar with, but people out there who don't know Christ or not involved in church may not be familiar with at all. So you'll see us, sometimes use words that are not as simple as they need to be for the church members, but it can be real useful and helpful in reaching those that are unchurched. Yeah. And the whole idea of a series on topics and sometimes on books of the Bible, and the question that people bring up about where we get these, well, first of all, we do get ideas from other churches. In fact, churches do this a lot. Now, I've got some friends, and we exchange these ideas and things that were successful at our church, and they tell us what was good for their church. We get online, and there's a place where there's this reciprocal sharing of information. We do that as well, but we don't preach another church's sermon. We preach our own because we, as you can tell if you hear us preach, Nick and I are unique in our presentations of the gospel, and we work and study to relate these issues and these topics to our local culture, to our congregation, and so that's, we do our own work, but sometimes we borrow graphics from someone else or even use some of their titles or ideas, and they use ours as well. So this thing goes both ways. And you also need to know, from a bigger picture, Nick and I get away and do a sermon planning day, once or twice a year, where we think about and dream about and just brainstorm about different ideas, different things that we can teach, and how that can help people understand the Scripture and God's love. And so he and I will do that together. Sometimes we also do this at staff retreat, and we get the input of the whole ministry staff, and we come up with lots of ideas that are possibilities. In fact, we usually have more ideas than we can ever possibly use. This particular series came originally germinated about 2 years ago when I had the idea of let's do a series from the book of Psalms and call it Cries of the Heart, because in the book of Psalms you find so much expression of universal human anguish and struggles, and how everyone could relate to that. And so as we've looked at different things that we needed to talk about and mix up, it's taken 2 years for us to get around to it, but here it is. And so as we prepare these series, we get into these production meetings with Mike Littleton, with our music leaders, and others who help to bring together the ideas for music, for videos, for decoration on the set, and even give us ideas about our expression of these biblical messages in our sermons. And so it all starts coming together. And sometimes they come out of there with an idea about a particular kind of set that might be useful. And this one in particular that you see behind us here with the Cries of the Heart. Nick, you want to say something about why use something like this? What use is it? What value?
Part of the issue of one of the things that we see in the book of Psalms theologically is, you can ask, and there's a number of places in the Bible where God speaks to people. And so there's a message from God to people. But the strange thing about the book of Psalms and a couple other places in the Bible is it's a place where God is giving human beings revelation by means of a human being speaking to God. And in some cases in the Psalms, if you read through the whole book of Psalms, you'll find a number of places where God's revelation to us of how a human being ought to speak to him is very honest, very open, very sometimes very painful, oftentimes not particularly reverent, but just very direct, but yet still faithful always. The Psalms always still come around to, even though I feel this way and I'm thinking about you this way, I'm going to trust and believe in that kind of thing. So, but what they are is they're a personal cry, but once you take that personal cry and you put it out publicly in the psalm, so many other people can identify with it. And that's kind of the same thing with graffiti or the graffiti wall, is that somebody wrote their private heart's cry out somewhere publicly. But once they write it, if you look at some of the things people wrote on the graffiti wall, many, many people can identify with it.
Sure.
And so, in that sense, what graffiti is in an urban setting is something like what the Psalms are theologically. The Psalms are just a better example of it.
Sure.
But that came out of a meeting of 4 or 5 different people, and then that went to another meeting with 4 or 5 different people to brainstorm how we could make this happen until it became something that sat on this stage.
And here it is.
So, and the whole idea behind that is that we have, as a church, the core value of dynamic worship. That before our staff, day in and day out, that's the one core value at this church that we don't, as the staff, preach at the congregation, but it's one of the main core values that the congregation and the staff preach at the staff. That we don't have the right to bore people. Mm-hmm. That's not our job. We have to take the Bible in one hand and the contemporary culture in the other and try to merge them in engaging worship services that glorify God and that help people understand what God is really like. And so that's just us trying to do that.
Yeah. And we're not always successful, but that's always what we're trying to do.